Hello, welcome back to my haunted library. It's Regina. So I thought I would dress up for Easter Sunday. I love Easter. It's always a sign of spring for me. So whether you celebrate Easter or Passover or any other holiday, religious holiday or pagan holiday, I hope you have a lovely day. So yes, I love wearing hats. I know it's considered a bit eccentric now to wear hats, which is kind of strange because like now you can walk to the store in your pajamas and your slippers and no one thinks twice. But if you dress up like this, and I know because I've done it, and wear a hat and walk into the store, you get all kinds of strange looks and sometimes rude comments, I must say. Where back in the day, if you walked out of the house with your pajamas on, people would think you're having a breakdown. And now it's the opposite. I don't know, very strange. I've missed the days where people dressed up every day. I still do it, but yes, sometimes I do get a little harassed by it. I feel like this outfit is appropriate also for doing a V.C. Andrews review because in a V.C. Andrews story, they're always wearing clothes that are like matching pink and pleated skirts with pink cardigans with Peter Pan collars, and I just love it. So here we go. This is the next book in the next series. So I finished the Cutler series, and now I started on the Landry series. And the first book in that series is Ruby. I love the back cover with all the different characters, especially the grandfather, Grandpere. And I'm going to be talking a little bit also about the new Lifetime movie that came out. The series is up. I don't know if all of the episodes are up. I only watched the first because I'm reading the books and then I'm watching the movies. So, yeah, where do I begin? Actually, I think that this one, so far, this first book in the series, to me, has eclipsed Dawn, no pun intended. And I'm pretty sure that's why Lifetime went with this series. Now, I haven't read the whole thing, but also the setting is a lot more exotic in the Bayou in New Orleans than Virginia Beach, let's be honest. So, okay, where do I start with Ruby? I loved this book. I thought the book was excellent, and I will have spoilers as I discuss it. So there are a lot of course, V.C. Andrewish themes in it, which I'll discuss too. So it begins in the Bayou of Louisiana with the Cajun people, and it's told in a pretty realistic way, I believe. And Ruby is her mother's dead, and she lives with her grandmere, who is like a midwife medicine woman of the Bayou. So there's almost a sense that she, not really a witch, but that she's a healer. She's a mystical, magical healer woman, and a very positive character. But she kicked out the husband out of the bed and out of the house, and he's got his own shack in the Bayou. And I imagined it like, there's like a broom pole holding it up. And he gives tours through the Bayou. He catches crawfish and shrimp and this kind of thing to make a living. And they're very poor. But there's a sense that they're happy, Ruby and her grandmother. And Ruby is an artist. She's a natural gifted artist. So I've noticed that in these V.C. Andrews characters, and the heroines usually have some kind of artistic talent. So she and Grandmere every weekend set up a little table where they sell their wares, and Ruby sells her paintings and Grandmere sells her crafts and maybe her potions. And one day, an art gallery owner, someone who lives in New Orleans, so there's a class difference between the Cajuns in the Bayou and the Creole people in New Orleans. New Orleans is one of my favorite cities in the United States, and if you've never been there, I highly recommend you take a trip there. It is just a magical, magical place, and it's like unlike any other U.S. city, and in its culture, its uniqueness, its music, of course, and its food, and just the entire vibe is something I really love. An art gallery owner from New Orleans drives by, and he's really impressed with Ruby's paintings, so he buys all of them. So she gets this wonderful feedback that she has talent, and now she has a little money. And Grandmere's like, better hide it from Grandpere, the grandfather, because Ruby's not really sure why he's been ostracized by Granmere, but she knows it must have been something serious. So Ruby does have a boyfriend. Now, this part of the story I felt like was really shoehorned in as far as cramming that V.C. Andrews trope in there, is that Ruby has a boyfriend named Paul, and they have this very sweet romance. And they go to the, I forget what it's called, the dance hall, Fay Dodo or something. I'll write it here. I might have mispronounced it. I actually went to it. My husband and I went to a Cajun dance hall when we were in New Orleans on one of our trips, so I really should remember that. That was lots of fun. So they have a very sweet romance until Granmere tells Ruby, well, you guys, you got to stop the romance because, let me guess, can you figure out what the twist is? Perhaps they're related. Perhaps they're brother and sister. Ding, ding, ding. They're like half brother and sister. The mother, her mother had him and then, of course, gave away to the grandfather sold the kid to this wealthier family. I don't know. It's the same old predictable plot. So then Ruby has to break up with Paul, and she doesn't tell him the truth because it would devastate him. So she tells him that she just wants to have an artist's life where she experiences all kinds of things. And he, of course, interprets that as, you mean men. So then the Granmere falls ill, and she tells Ruby the truth about her parents, that her mother died in childbirth, and that her father was a rich man, who still is a rich man, named Pierre Dumas, and he's a Creole living in New Orleans in a mansion. So she is from this pedigree. And that the rift between her and the grandfather was because when the mother, I think her name's Gabrielle, gave birth, she actually gave birth to twins. And this is a good twist on the story. So now we have a twin story. And Giselle, twin number one, I guess the first baby, is sold by the grandfather to the father, and then the real father, and then they leave, and he and his wife Daphne, she's the typical mother character, kind of combination mother-grandmother character, and the mother gives birth to another baby, that's Ruby, and Granmere said, "Get the hell off my porch, you ain't taking this one." I did like a southern accent, not a Cajun accent. So Granpierre goes off to live in his shack, and Granmere, who's a lovely character, raises Ruby. So Ruby's, got a lot of information. And then Granmere dies. It's very sad. And then Granpierre, in typical horrible patriarchal character that you find in these books, fashion, tries to sell Ruby's virginity off basically to this friend of his. And he even goes as far as to chain her to the bed, which is very dramatic, and it's very backwoods. And it's pretty great. And it was great in the TV movie too. I'm glad they included that scene because it was highly dramatic. He chains her to the bed, and the guy's going to come up and take her virginity and rape her. But because Granpierre is always drunk, he didn't do a very good job of chaining Ruby to the bed. So the guy comes up, she, hits him in the face with the chain, at least in the movie. Now, I don't really remember if this is exactly what happened in the book, but I might be conflating the two. But she escapes, and she takes the money that she had gotten from the paintings, and she is going to find her way to New Orleans from the bayou and meet her real father. And that's a pretty typical development in a V.C. Andrews story. It's like you're actually this wealthy person. It's like a Cinderella story. You were poor, but you're actually a princess, a hidden princess. But of course, it has the darkness attached to it because Dawn went there, Heaven went there, now Ruby, but it doesn't turn out in a very positive way. So again, we have now the weak father, Pierre Dumas, Daphne, his wife, who is the Corinne character. She is all about her beauty and and just pampering herself and living this wealthy life, and she really doesn't want to deal with this new child in the mix, Ruby, and Giselle, who is actually a great character. Giselle is that evil counterpart, the Fanny, the Fern. We've seen this character before, and it's great. It's like your typical antagonist. So even though these characters and plot developments are very familiar, they're all based on these like stock characters, and that's why they work in a lot of ways. You know, those characters dating back to the Commedia dell'arte in Italy in the Renaissance or before, Greek tragedy. You find these characters. They work dramatically. So when Ruby is on the bus to New Orleans, she meets a prostitute who, well, she doesn't know she's a prostitute. She says she's a lounge singer, but she works she's looking for work in New Orleans, and she gives her some voodoo charm. So voodoo also enters into the story, which is fun. When Ruby's at the gate of the mansion, she runs into Giselle's boyfriend, Beau, who's a strapping young buck, and he thinks that it's Giselle dressed up like a slob, for her Mardi Gras costume. It's Mardi Gras. He shows up. He's like, "Oh, that's an interesting costume. You're dressed like a Cajun girl." Of course, they figure out that she's the twin sister. Giselle and Ruby meet, and Giselle just instantly hates Ruby. There's instant jealousy, sibling rivalry, and she does everything she can to make Ruby's life miserable, including having, during a sleepover party, kind of setting her up to take her clothes off to put a costume on, and some boys are behind the shower curtain, and they open the shower curtain and take a picture with a flash camera and send that picture all over school. So intentionally humiliating her. At least they didn't do the laxatives this time. So there's that. But Giselle is just increasingly mean to Ruby. She sets her up as being this like slut, and Daphne thinks that she's a bad influence on Giselle because she's ill-mannered and she's like a Cajun girl, and she's, used to having sex with all these boys and all this stuff, which of course is not true. So Ruby is so desperate because Giselle is just being so mean to her and torturing her that she confides in Nina, the cook at the household, and Nina knows a little bit about voodoo, and she takes her into the French Quarter, into a voodoo shop to meet, I think she's called Dee Dee, who's a voodoo queen. I've actually been to a voodoo shop a couple times in New Orleans and had my tarot cards read and all that stuff, and really had a great time. So Dee Dee puts this spell on Giselle, or she helps Ruby put a spell on Giselle. And of course, as we know about any time you put a bad spell on anyone, it can backfire. Just ask Matilda. So that's what happens, and Giselle is with her other boyfriend, Martin, and they're smoking a doobie in his convertible, and they ask Ruby to drive with them, and she says no, and they drive off and have a terrible car wreck. Martin is killed, and Giselle is paralyzed, so now we have our wheelchair character. And it is kind of sad, like as mean as Giselle was to Ruby, I did feel bad for her. And I think that was good because Ruby also feels bad for her. Ruby knows that she went too far. And then she makes a really bad mistake. Out of guilt, she tells Giselle, well, I did, go to this voodoo queen and we put a spell on you. So now Giselle has leverage to torture Ruby again. Oh, there's this whole subplot that I forgot about Pierre's insane brother who lives in a mental hospital, Jean. And it's all Pierre's fault that he is sick because, I don't know, he hit him over the head with a jib when they were out on the lake or something. I don't know. So Daphne asks Ruby to come with her to visit Jean in the asylum. So Daphne sets up Ruby at the insane asylum to have her committed because she is out of control, insane nymphomaniac that is destroying the family. Hey, that gives me an idea about something. Well, maybe not today. So Ruby manages to escape from the asylum, and I love the way they did that scene in the movie. It's like all canted angles, like Dutch tilts, and she's climbing through the window, and this music is really great. It was very well done, actually. She goes back to the mansion. At this point, Pierre has turned into that weak male character where he's just in a decline and lost in his own kind of fantasy world, and Daphne has taken over. So Ruby escapes and she goes back home, and Paul shows up for a visit, and they kind of get back together, not romantically, although he still wants that, I guess, in typical fashion. So I did love the Lifetime movie. I highly recommend it if you want to check that out. The actress who plays both characters, Giselle and Ruby, is excellent. She really gives a great difference between the two characters. And I really love seeing Naomi Judd playing Grandmere. And I love the fact that even though she's like this woman living in the bayou, she still has her false eyelashes on. I'm totally about that. I mean, her acting was very flat, like her delivery, but there was still something lovely about her playing that character. So those were my thoughts about Ruby. I really love the book and I love the movie. Let me know in the comments below if you've read the book or if you've seen the movie. I would love to hear your thoughts. So that's all I have for today. Have a lovely Easter Sunday, or whatever it is you celebrate. Have a lovely day. And I will see you next time in my haunted library. Bye!